Hey all, Jason Levon, priest at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and welcome to another edition of Pause and Pray. This morning I woke up breathing anxious sighs as I looked at a very lengthy to-do list. I started tackling it at about 7 in the morning, but as I moved through the morning, more things were being added to it than were being crossed off it, and I found myself growing more anxious. I suspect I'm like most clergy in that we're working really hard during this pandemic. Things are really stressful, but as I looked at my to-do list, I also found myself wondering, am I about the right things, the things I should be about, or maybe not? And I suspect in that light, we're no different than anybody else during this pandemic as we're struggling to adjust to things like virtual schooling and working from home and all of the other ways in which our relationships and ways of life have been interrupted and impacted by COVID-19. But for me, as I found myself focused on my to-do list and the struggle of whether or not I was about the right things, that can and often does for me become a very self-absorbing endeavor. Not that I'm overtly arrogant about it all, but that somehow I mistakenly think that it all depends on my efforts, on my work. And that's when I was blessed to have two very holy conversations in the middle of this morning. One that was a planned conversation with a colleague I love and respect greatly. The other, an unplanned conversation with a very dedicated parish member here at St. Luke's. And as my colleague listened to me in love and listened to my struggles, he was able to help me see deeper than my work and see a deeper love at work in the midst of St. Luke's, in the creative ways that connection was happening here during this pandemic. Often not because of me at all, and the celebration of all of that, and in a sense gave me permission to be a bit gentler on myself than I usually am. And then I followed that up with this conversation with a beloved parishioner who helped me celebrate and see that despite my anxiety and uncertainty, ministry and life and faith and love was still stirring here at St. Luke's as we were talking about the ministries that have expanded and even the new ministries that were created and have been created recently that will forever change St. Luke's for the better even after this pandemic. And while I started my morning breathing anxious sighs, I ended it breathing prayerful sighs and humble sighs, and recognizing that it wasn't about me, and that was a good thing, because oftentimes I'm good at getting in the way, but that it was about something greater at work in and through life here at St. Luke's Church. That's the gift that Jesus came to bring in so many ways in the Gospels. In today's daily office Gospel, we read from chapter 11 of Luke, where Jesus just finished healing somebody who was possessed, which in the Gospels, any kind of healing story was meant to signify that the kingdom of God had come nearer. As Jesus says in chapter 11 of Luke, the kingdom of God is upon you. And then he follows that up by calling the people's attention back to the wisdom of Solomon and the prophetic wisdom of Jonah, and says to the people, but something so much greater than Solomon and Jonah is at work here. What a tremendous gift for us to pause and pray about today in a culture that grows as self-reliant as ours is, or for people like me who grow so self-reliant, whether we realize it or not, focused on our to-do lists or what we're doing or maybe what we're not doing. And in the midst of that, to celebrate that it's not really about us at all, but about something greater at work in and through our lives. And to pause and pray about how we experience that greater presence at work in and through our lives. Maybe through the gift of holy conversations like I had this morning that reminded me that despite my anxiety and uncertainty and struggles, that faith and hope and love and life were still stirring in beautiful ways here at St. Luke's Church. Or maybe it comes when we find ourselves pulled into awe and wonder by the gift of a beautiful fall day, or the gift of children, or maybe the kindness of another person. And in none of that did we have a hand, and yet it touches our lives and pulls us into gratitude. And maybe the more we can pause and pray about experiences like that, the more we find the grace to be gentler with ourselves and with one another as we come to realize that it's not about the work we do or don't do, but about celebrating the work God does in and through our lives. God's peace and blessings to you all.